Good morning and good afternoon. All of the different teachings that we receive through our tradition from Shakyamuni Buddha onward, all of them are really for the purpose of bringing us a sense of peace within ourselves and our ability to generate peace around us and feelings of joy and connectedness. So even though we sometimes study things that feel a little abstract or technical, it always just comes back to that very simple thing, always comes back to the simple thing of being functioning in accord with reality, which results in feelings of ease and care. So it's always that, no matter what we're talking about. So one of my favorite teachings is that we are made of everything other than ourselves. We're made of everything other than ourselves. Everything is empty of itself. And I think the convention is that we think of ourselves like this little person that's wandering through an environment, and that we're reasonably consistent in time and space. We're an entity that's an ongoing entity surrounded by an environment, and that with our eyes and with our ears we are seeing and hearing things and taking those sights and those sounds into our mind, into our brain, and thinking about them. So that's kind of the convention, that we're moving through an environment and seeing things, and we're the agent. We're an agent that is interpreting phenomena around us. And it's not an unhelpful way to view the world, it's a practical way to view the world. But it really is only it's just one little slither of truth. It's like the most rough, the most crude interpretation. I don't mean that in a bad way, it's just the most obvious. It's the most obvious way of making sense of reality. It's just a little crack. But a lot of us function that way, kind of a lot of the time. But our practice really encourages us to think about ourselves and our environment very differently to that. And in some ways we understand it intellectually quite easily with objects. For example, we can pretty easily understand that this stick, well actually a piece of paper is a very good example. We really do understand that this piece of paper is made from trees and water and sunlight. It's not very hard to understand that. We all pretty much get that. Slightly harder for us to know that our bodies are made of sunlight and water and things like rice and carrots and bread and so on. A little harder for us to really understand that. And that food that makes up our body is made up itself of the soil, which itself is made up of all the other prior plant matter that has decayed and rotted back into the ground. It's a little harder for us to, on an ordinary, everyday basis, remember that we're made of food and water and sunlight. But it's true. completely true. We can't made of ourselves. Like, I can't make myself. My hands can't make my hands. My blood can't make more blood. We're made of everything other than ourselves. And all those things that we're made of are also made of everything other than themselves. So nothing is made of itself, and nothing can make itself. This is something that's really worth contemplating deeply. And like, I think it was last week's talk, all these teachings only become powerful, like really powerful, when we contemplate them ourselves in Zazen and while we're going about our daily life, and when the truth of them dawns on us ourselves, like we suddenly realize the truth of them. It totally makes sense to us. That's when these teachings become very powerful and all-pervading in our life, when they become ours, when they become completely ours. I totally know this. I totally know that I am made of everything other than myself. And I can function that way. I'll function that way. And the effect of realizing that we're made of everything other than ourselves, the effect that it has on us is an immense sense of gratitude, because we realize, oh my gosh, like this temple is creating me right now. All of us together, we're creating ourselves right now. Those who are joining here online, creating us right now. It's this great sense of gratitude. And a sense of care, because the things that create us, why would we want to destroy the things that create us? We want to care for the things that create us. And it lessens our sense of ourselves as this separate entity that's walking through the environment. It lessens our sense of that in a way that reduces self-concern. Am I good enough? Do people like me? Am I doing better or worse than some other person? Those sorts of things. That lessens our grip on all of that. Because we understand ourselves to be not, even porous isn't a good enough word. We're way more than porous. Like we're completely interpenetrated. Or like Thich Nhat Hanh says, we are interbeing with everything. And when we don't remember it, even with something simple like a piece of paper, that's why people waste paper. People waste paper because they forget that paper comes from trees, and trees create the oxygen for the earth, or make it available to us to breathe. People forget that. And one thing I've been thinking about recently is not just this in the physical way, that we're made of food and air, oxygen and sun, but I've been really thinking about my mind and my mood, and how all the thoughts that I have and the feelings that I have, all the moods that I go through in a day, are completely dependent on all the experiences that I'm having with my senses. Again, we tend to think that we are here with our head and a brain inside, and that the brain is just and the senses are just engaging with things, but as if our mind is still an autonomous thing. But I've been really thinking about my existence, and my whole experience, my experience is 100% dependent on what we think of as the external world. My mood changes moment by moment based on the external world, or this, what we call the external world. Just here, when we were sitting here this morning in Zazen, I was just so appreciating the space of sitting here. It had a different effect on my mood and on my body than when I'm driving the car, which wasn't a bad thing, driving the car, but it was just different. And one of the reasons I think why it's so valuable for us to create wholesome environments for people around us, because our existence, our words, our actions are influencing their experience, and not just influencing their experience. This is, I think, the subtlety of the teaching. It is creating their experience. The world is creating my experience. If all of my senses were completely closed off, I would still have my memory, and the memory is of experiences that were there, that I had in the past. But if my memory could also be erased, and then all my senses closed off, I wouldn't have any sense of existence. My whole existence, my whole experience, not just my physical existence, but my whole experience is completely and utterly created by the world around me. And this is how it is for all of us. And it's just that it's so stable and so consistently there that we don't really realize that it's kind of holding us up moment by moment by moment. So on this kind of theme, this is the emptiness teachings, which I've been reading from quite a lot lately. Throw yourself into the house of Buddha, the teachings of Tangen Harada Roshi. He describes a ceremony which I've never participated in this ceremony, but my teacher, Kokyo Henko, has with Tangen Roshi in Japan. And I'll just read out a little bit. During the first days of the new year, we hold the Daihanya ceremony in the Hondo. We take all 600 volumes of the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra, and during the morning chanting, we fan through them. Pages of sutra are flying in the cold morning air in front of our eyes. It's too fast for the intellect to understand what is written, but the wind spreads the true meaning of the teachings. So this ceremony is like the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra is like really, really large, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, the full volumes of the texts. Most Zen centers chant a little one-page version like we do in the mornings. But there's a very vast volume, and the pages are kind of folded like I don't know what you quite call that. They're folded like a concertina kind of thing. And you can fan the book. You can like fan it across like that so that the pages all open and close. And I was thinking about that. It's like when the pages are all closed up, it's dark. And they're not seeing light. But when you open it up and fan it, just for a split second, each page gets a little bit of light on it, and a little bit of air on it. It's a bit like the universe is getting to read the sutra. The sun gets to read the sutra as it fans across from one side to the other. So you can see videos of people doing this ceremony where all the monks and nuns are fanning the sutras like that. And while they're doing that, they chant this verse, which I'd just like to go through a little bit line by line. But I'll just read it through first, 6 lines. All phenomena arise from causes and conditions. Arising from causes and conditions, they have no self-nature. Having no self-nature, they neither come nor go. As they neither come nor go, there is nothing to gain. There being nothing to gain, therefore all is emptiness. All being emptiness, we call it prajna paramita. So it's like condensing the whole of the Hat Sutra down to 6 lines. All phenomena arise from causes and conditions. It's a bit of another way of what I've just been speaking about. Everything is empty of itself. Everything is caused by something else, and the something else that caused it is caused by something else, and so on and so on. You can't actually put your finger on anything. You can't pin anything down. Arising from causes and conditions, they have no self-nature. So they have no separate, independent nature. So nothing has its own separate, consistent nature. And therefore, having no self-nature, they neither come nor go. And we can think about this in terms of our own life, birth and death. We conventionally think of ourselves as being born, arising out of nothing. We suddenly appear, we suddenly exist, we live a life, and then we die and we're gone. That's kind of, people have beliefs like in heaven and so on. But there's a sense, a conventional sense that we arrive, we live a life and we die. But we all know that something can't arise out of nothing. Energy can't be generated out of non-energy. Something can't just appear out of nowhere. It's just always in a state of transformation. So as we understand that we, as a separate entity, don't exist, we can start to let go of the idea of ourself having been born specifically and that we will die specifically. We can start to sort of open out and think of it more as that we have just been transforming. We're just transforming from however you want to interpret it in the past, prior to our birth in this particular form, and what we will be after. I tend to think of it as just the energy all dissipates into the different minds and different, like the physical matter obviously turns into dirt and smoke and so on. But all of the influences that we've had, everyone we've interacted with, everything that we've done, the energy of that is continuing on. And that doesn't stop. The pebble hits the water and the ripples ripple on. Just because the pebble has penetrated the water and dropped underneath doesn't mean the ripples stop. The ripples keep going. So we all keep going. And I feel this very directly in relation to my father, who passed away a long time ago. I really feel his qualities in myself. Over the years, more and more I notice his qualities in myself. Mostly his good qualities. Occasionally his slightly cranky qualities. Just occasionally, I just get slightly irritated with my grandchildren. For goodness sake! That's my father. For God's sake, what are you doing? He would do that, and I do that every now and then. But mostly, I think he had many good qualities. So some of those live on in me and in all sorts of other people that he interacted with in his life. So just continuing with this verse. So having no self-nature, they neither come nor go. As they neither come nor go, there is nothing to gain. I think this is very challenging for us to really, really rest. And there's nothing that can be actually gained. We can't get anything. Some of us have been talking a little bit about the precepts lately, and Jack's leading a class on the precepts, and I think the conversation on taking up the precept of not stealing is coming up next. Is that right, Jack? Is that the next one? Yeah, I think that is. Yeah. And this line, as there is neither coming nor going, there is nothing to gain, can help us get that sense is we don't need to grab at things. We don't need to try and grab and hold on to things. ultimately there's nothing to gain, nothing to lose, nothing to gain. We still function like that little person wandering through the landscape. We still do function that way. So we have to make sure we have enough food and water and so on. But we don't need to, we are not lacking. On an essential level, we don't lack anything. I think this is very challenging. Sometimes I want things a little bit more than they are. I want them to be a little different to how they are. And then I can remember this teaching and relax a little bit. There being nothing to gain, therefore all is emptiness. And emptiness is sort of using the negative way of saying everything is one, is the positive way. One is the empty, one is the full way of saying the same thing. All being empty, we call it prajna paramita. All being empty, we call it the perfection of wisdom. So this is the great wisdom of how, the best way that we can put language to how reality actually is. I'll read another little part from this book about no self. Certainly there is no fixed permanent self, and this doesn't apply only to things that you think are outside of you. The very same thing applies to you yourself. There is no self. Yes, there are thoughts, but they are all learned from other people. When we are born, you didn't have any thoughts. Yes, there are feelings, but feelings never appear without an external stimulus. They always arise in relation to circumstances. There is not even my body. This body, if we are keeping track of it, would be 240 bags of rice, 450 bottles of milk, 275 carrots, 190 radishes, and so forth. Far from being a dependent, separate self, everything is received, given. Trace your steps. How did you get here? Step by step by step, you are dependent on the great earth. We are always thinking, I made this, I did that. Look closely at just one case of I made this or I did that, and you can see that it's all being received, coming together. All things arise through causes and conditions. Nowhere is there any solid and abiding self. There is simply a crystallization of indebtedness, a gift of heaven and earth, thoroughly protected and cared for. So when I read this line, there is simply a crystallization of indebtedness. I just thought that was so great. That this body, this solid appearing thing, is a crystallization of all the gifts it's received. It's a crystallization of indebtedness. We are completely and utterly indebted, every single moment. And every single one of us. So there's actually, people are slightly prone to guilt. There's no one to feel indebted to in a guilty kind of way, because they're all just crystallizations of indebtedness as well. We're all just crystallizations of indebtedness. It's very beautiful to really contemplate that. Every little insect that you see, every little animal, every plant, every object is indebted to the universe for its existence. And just going back to the original thought that I'd been having this week about mood, that our mood is completely dependent on our environment. And having a little bit of a background in psychology, sometimes people, and in everyday common sort of psychology, we often think in terms of brain chemistry, dopamine, oxycontin, serotonin, endorphins, and so on. When I'm in Goongra on the land, I think I get lots and lots of dopamine because it's very reward oriented for me down there. I spend a lot of time doing things in the landscape at the moment, as people have heard me speak about, cutting down still the dead trees from the black summer fires, still processing and dealing with all of that and all the brambles that have grown between them, cutting them all down. And now it's getting to the point where I can kind of cut the grass, and for the first time there was enough grass that I could mulch it around the fruit trees that didn't die in the fires, so that it's starting to look a little bit like an orchard again, just a little bit like an orchard again. My whole system just gets flooded with dopamine. That's I think why I love it down there so much, because I'm working with my body, and the problems are solvable, and I'm solving them, and my system loves it. My body loves it. But I could easily think that I am the one having the good feeling, that I'm doing it because I'm working on the land, I'm feeling good. I could think of it that way. That would be the conventional way to think about it. And not a bad way to think about it, but it's not really a very accurate way. A more accurate way, and I think a more beneficial way, being more accurate is generally speaking going to be more beneficial, is that the environment, that all of that around is giving me this experience, this flooding of dopamine has been given to me by the trees and by the tools as well, and the clouds and the sky. It's beautiful to be out there in the open air, the sun above my head all day, sky above my head all day, and the river, being able to hear the river. It's just right there, babbling all day, and there's frogs croaking and birds, and we have lyrebirds. Just hearing the lyrebirds, sometimes they just go on and on and on for ages, making all different bird sounds. And oxytocin we get by being kind to each other. When you're kind, when you say something kind, when you think something kindly, a little flush of oxytocin happens. So in a way, if we're being kind to someone, that other person has generated like that. It's their existence. Had they not been there, we couldn't think kind thoughts towards them, or the animal, or the plant. So it's not our doing. It's a relationship. It's a dynamic relationship. And we get serotonin from just enjoyment, including zazen. Gives us that experience. Positive feelings. And endorphins from exercising, which I think is the other thing that I experience a lot being on the land. So I think we can, in contemplating this, encourage ourselves to create good environments for other people so that their experience, generated by their environment that we're a part of, will be beneficial for them. Feeling great gratitude to everything that's creating us. Letting it help dismantle our self-identification. Contemplating this teaching can help us be less caught up in self-concern. And with gratitude, you always feel like with that goes a kind of joy and an open-heartedness. I remember Reb used to say, everything is relationship only. He would sometimes say in talks. It's all a conversation. I remember him also saying that. It's all a conversation. We're in this constant dialogue all the time with everything. Right. I might stop there and I'll turn off the recording.